Welcome to the John Ligato Experience. As a law enforcement officer, I've been involved in some tense situations, but that was a long time ago, and today's cops and agents have a new normal. The key elements of when deadly force is allowed are: if you feel that yourself or others are in imminent danger of death or serious bodily harm. That sounds simple enough, but attorneys and liberal court districts muddy the waters on almost every deadly force incident. There are very few circumstances that will change this basic justification on the use of deadly force. One legal departure is that 25 states have laws called Stand Your Ground. This simply means that when faced with imminent danger, you have no legal requirement to retreat before you eliminate the threat. The other 25 states look at if you could have safely avoided the risk of harm or death by walking away, for example. And Texas is the only state that allows deadly force to protect property. So how does a simple declarative statement get twisted, distorted, and manipulated? You're a cop. You get a disturbance call at Walmart. You and your partner arrive, and it seems simple enough.
Officials say the deputies came after employees made a 911 call needing help at the store. A couple allegedly tried to pass a fraudulent receipt to steal expensive electronics.
So we can do this civilly?
Initially, the interaction with the suspects was cordial.
Yeah, the receipt right there. Yeah, okay, stop stealing. Let's go. I don't do this. You're like 40 years old and you're still stealing, dude? Get a job. Let's go.
2 seconds later, the deputy facing the suspect points out that he has a knife. As the arresting deputy spots the suspect's hand on the weapon, he attempts to handcuff him.
Look, dude, you're making this hard on yourself. Stop resisting my partner.
The man, identified as 30-year-old Ernest Aguilar, who had outstanding warrants, resists. As 3 deputies wrestle with Aguilar, a civilian steps in to try and help. They all fall to the ground. That's when a gun is spotted in the suspect's hand.
He's got a gun! He's got a gun! Shoot him! Somebody shoot him! 463. Shots fired. Shots fired.
Did this meet the requirements of deadly force? Well, liberals will argue that the police could have tased him, or why couldn't 4 cops control 1 man? They will go on forever with the what-ifs, but they weren't there.
You went from stopping somebody with a stop sign violation to having to use deadly force in about 6 seconds.
Back up, please.
And you know that the courts and everybody else are going to have the next 6 months or a year to dissect every little piece of it, and now you have to live with that decision for the rest of your life.
Can a public official use the same law to indict or dismiss charges based on their own bias and prejudice?
Charged with aggravated assault of Ms. Pilgrim, and this is for pointing a taser at Mrs. Pilgrim. And as many of you all know, under Georgia law, a taser is considered as a deadly weapon under Georgia law.
This man is the senior prosecutor in Atlanta, Georgia. He's also a hypocrite who charged a police officer for pointing a taser at a woman. It's also a classic case of selective prosecution, since he later determined that a taser is not a deadly weapon.
The shooting death of Rayshard Brooks in Atlanta this weekend has added new fuel to the national conversation and protests around the use of force. Atlanta police answered a call Friday night that Brooks was asleep in his car at a Wendy's restaurant drive-thru. The encounter began calmly, but escalated when police tried to arrest Brooks for driving under the influence. Brooks fought with the officers and then ran away with one of their taser guns. After Brooks fired the taser, one of the officers shot Brooks twice in the back. The officer was fired and charges may be filed this week. Today, hello to both of you. Thank you so much for being here. I know this 40-minute encounter, it's too much to go over every second of it, but the two of you have looked at, as much as we know, the video that's been released. And my question to you is, could this have been headed off from the very beginning? Did the police, coming across a man sitting in his car who had fallen asleep, did they have to arrest him? David Thomas, let me ask you about that moment when police made the decision not to just let it go, that instead they decide they did give him a test of whether he had been driving under the influence and then made the decision to arrest him. Did they have a choice to say, you can go?
The problem with making that choice or having that choice or using discretion, what actually happens in that process is if I let him go, there's nothing to keep him from returning to that vehicle and driving it, and he's impaired. So because of that, the police do nothing, and if he kills somebody, then the police are going to be held liable for that. So it's a double-edged sword. In most instances, I've seen this happen where officers have done this, and the person comes back, takes the car, and they drive off. And so then that leads into a chase, and it's a mess. So the reality is, I think that as much as I would like to say, don't make the arrest, I don't think you have much of a choice because the officers are responsible.
Let's get back to District Attorney Howard, who can't seem to make up his mind if a taser is a deadly weapon. This is called selective prosecution, and it makes a mockery of our justice system because guys like Howard rip the mask off Lady Justice and tips her scales when it suits their own prejudices.
Tonight, lawyers representing former Atlanta officer Garrett Rolfe are responding to some of the claims the Fulton County District Attorney has leveled against him. A long list of claims. Rolfe is facing 11 charges, including felony murder, after he fired the deadly shots at Rayshard Brooks. Brooks had a taser as he ran away, and they also bring up the ongoing question of whether a taser is considered a deadly weapon. Defense attorneys say in their statement that Howard claims a taser is not a deadly weapon. But during a press conference on June 2nd regarding a different case of alleged police brutality, District Attorney Paul Howard did say that a taser is a deadly weapon.
Riots usually involve an adrenaline-fueled crowd, some of whom are ideologues, but some use the opportunity to loot, burn, pillage, and hurt cops.
What began as a peaceful protest at Grant Park Friday evening devolved into a very dangerous situation in which mob action deliberately sought to injure officers.
The mayor decried the violence, calling those responsible vigilantes. The video showed one person dumping out a backpack with what appeared to be frozen water bottles, which were then thrown at officers. Demonstrators also hurled fireworks, one sergeant suffering a broken eye socket from the shrapnel. Police said the PVC pipe used to hold the Black Lives Matter banners had been sharpened and were taken out and used to jab at officers. Members of the City Council's Progressive Caucus focused their criticism on police who were accused of punching one 18-year-old protester in her mouth.
We need to change our way to approach public safety, the way that we approach this kind of situation, because we cannot have teenagers, exemplary teenagers, being brutalized, by participating in the freedom to speak.
Liberals couch words like exemplary teenagers being brutalized, but fail to mention what this 18-year-old model citizen did prior to getting punched in the mouth.
We reached out to Black Lives Matter Chicago to respond to what the mayor and the superintendent had to say, but our emails and calls were not returned.
Let's talk about the biggest misconception of the deadly force policy. It not only allows deadly force if you're facing imminent death, but specifically adds or serious bodily harm. So let me ask you a few questions. If a brick hits you in the head, if people are propelling commercial-grade fireworks at you, if people are thrusting sharp objects at you, would that cause you serious bodily harm? That's it for today's show. If you like it, hit share, like, bells, whistles, whatever we got. There's no charge for that. You won't be asked any personal information. The John Ligato Experience is being broadcast from outside the gates of Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune in beautiful North Carolina. Semper Fidelis.